It's that time of year again. ACR Convergence 2024 is nearly here. Join us in Washington, D.C. from November 14th to the 19th and meet with colleagues from around the world. Enjoy thought-provoking sessions, listen to groundbreaking science, or join us for the Knowledge Bowl, Thieves Market, and the Image Competition. Register today at rheumatology.org. ACR Convergence 2024, where rheumatology meets.
Welcome back to another episode of ACR On Air, the official podcast of the American College of Rheumatology. I'm your host, Dr. John Hausman. Show notes for this episode can be found at acronair.org. You can also find our previous episodes on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on your favorite podcast app. This is my favorite time of year in rheumatology as I get ready for ACR Convergence 2024. Today, we've invited Dr. Greg Gardner, the chair of the ACR Annual Meeting Planning Committee, to discuss Convergence 2024. This year's meeting is packed with cutting-edge science, networking opportunities, and an enhanced focus on making the meeting even more engaging. We'll explore how the committee has been working tirelessly to improve the educational experience, adapt to the post-pandemic era, and bring forward new initiatives designed to better the lives of patients with rheumatic diseases. We'll also get a glimpse of the must-attend sessions, the changes to the networking lounge, and even some insider tips on how to make the most of your time in Washington, D.C. Dr. Greg Gardner is currently Emeritus Professor of Medicine at the University of Washington, where he previously held the prestigious Brew C. Gilland and Lucille T. Henderson Endowed Professorship in Medicine. He previously served as Clinical Director of the Division of Rheumatology and as Fellowship Program Director. He's widely recognized for his excellence in teaching. He's been a champion for underserved communities and has improved our understanding and care for patients with autoimmune lung disease. Enjoy the show. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Welcome. I'm glad to be here.
So, in thinking about planning Convergence 2024, is there a particular theme or particular objectives that you wanted to bring to the table this year?
Let me share with you the Convergence mission statement, illustrate what we as a committee feel are the most important elements of Convergence. So it was written about a year ago and approved by the entire committee, and it reads this. ACR Convergence will be the premier international rheumatology scientific meeting. Rheumatology professionals from around the world will be immersed in an impactful educational and networking experience each time they attend the meeting. ACR Convergence will improve the lives of people with rheumatic diseases by constantly moving the field of rheumatology forward. I left the word will be the premier international rheumatology meeting because that's something we have to work for each year when we plan the meeting. You've been on the committee before. You know how the whole process goes.
Do you want to tell people about it? Because I find it so fascinating. Just as Convergence 2023 ends in November of 23, you're already planning Convergence 2024.
Absolutely. So we have a pretty extensive pre-planning process. It begins, as you mentioned, right after the meeting. We first review what happened during the previous meeting, look at the statistics, look at the information, take the comments from attendees, and try to incorporate that into the next meeting. We have a kickoff program. We then go through all the proposals that have been submitted, look at the topics that we think are important, multiple Zoom meetings to think about what's going to be happening in the next meeting. In early February, we get together in person as an entire committee, which is about 80 people, put it together, and then more work happens because then all those speakers have to be invited. We have to put sessions on a big grid to make sure that they make sense for the size of the room we have available. I meet with the staff on a weekly basis, and we talk about issues of Convergence that continue. And we meet as a leadership group on a monthly basis by Zoom. It's a pretty extensive process. When I first joined the committee back in 2006, it was much simpler. It's actually gotten more complex. In
Yeah,
2020,
it's probably a much bigger meeting than it was. When you reviewed the data from 2023 and also being in San Diego in 23, were there things that you really enjoyed that you wanted to replicate in 2024? And are there aspects of the meeting that you want to change?
we're still emerging from the pandemic where everything was a virtual meeting. So there's a couple of changes this year. There will be no live streaming.
Big change.
So it may take some people by surprise, but live streaming is so expensive. I mean, it's incredible how much that technology costs. And so we decided to instead put that money into hopefully a more robust on-demand platform that hopefully will be available to people soon after the meeting or soon after the session happens so that they can participate in that way as opposed to live stream. What came out is the fact that we didn't think that there was a huge interest or demand in the live streaming process. Plus, we couldn't stream every session either.
Yeah, got it.
The other thing that came out that was very successful was the networking lounge. I think Sharon Kolinzinski, the former chair of the committee, came up with this great idea to have a space where people could gather. No content. It's not CME. There's no PowerPoint. It's just let's get together and discuss stuff. Whether it's medical students and residents, first time at the meeting, whether it's research groups that need to get together and coordinate their activities. We thought that was a very useful and impactful activity, and we're going to expand that this year as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. That was one of my favorite parts of Convergence 2023. Within, for instance, the pediatric rheumatology section, there were times where pediatric rheumatologists would meet. There'd be some light appetizers, and we'd get to chat about various topics. Also, groups like medical educators met in various times. And it was nice to have a little home away from the lectures where you can also relax and catch up on email or more importantly, catch up with friends you haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, it's a meet and greet space. It's more programmed this year, I think, than last year.
Awesome.
Lots of things people have come up with to actually utilize that space in an organized way. And I'm excited. We actually have the editors of major rheumatology journals, Joseph Smolin, Dan Solomon, and Kelly Allen are going to be for, come and meet the editors. We'll talk about publishing your work.
Why didn't you accept my paper?
I'll have to be there just to protect them from that kind of stuff.
That's really fantastic. I love that part, and I'm so happy to hear that you will carry that forward. Anything that you thought maybe didn't work about Convergence 23 or things that you feel like you want to change going forward?
Well, the weather was so bad there. We, being facetious, we'd love to be able to replicate that weather every place we go.
Yes.
Plus, the space was big. It was a nice space. So nothing that came out of the meeting suggested we needed to make a huge U-turn. So yeah, good question. We look at that and nothing sort of hit us as going, we can't do that again. We're actually going to add, one of the big hits, as you probably know, was coming back into the live poster hall.
Oh, I love the poster hall.
Poster hall was great. And, so it's just a hive of activity and it's a buzz of science and meet and greet and run into old friends and talk to the leaders in rheumatology and science. I mean, it's one of my favorite places to go. It's just incredible.
So we're going to have real posters. So I'll have to get it printed and carry it with me on the plane, right?
Correct. So I went to ULAR this year. They have everything was electronic, which has pros and cons. People don't have to bring their their posters with them. But the cons are it's very expensive and the screens aren't sort of big enough. And I was watching some of the poster tours at ULAR. Everybody was crowding around trying to see, and they had earphones on because you couldn't get close enough to the poster to see all the data. So the nice thing about having the printed posters is it's big and most people on a poster tour can see most of what you're talking about. But so it will still be that you'll have to carry that badge of honor with you, that poster on your back.
I love it.
And the other thing we're bringing back this year, We're bringing back actually the Meet the Professors.
Ah, how's that going to work? Because in the past, it used to be that you had to sign up and you had to pay for these sessions. How are you planning on organizing it this year?
So that's still the way that we're going to do it. So
Okay.
it's a little bit extra money, even though the meeting, as we'll talk about probably later, is pretty expensive to go to, and we'll talk about reasons for that. But it's a little bit of money to make sure people show up to the session. It'll be small groups. We've got some amazing people to facilitate those discussions. We're coming back with just about 20 sessions as opposed to the old days. We had 80 sessions. They were a big part of Convergence was the MTPs, we call them, Meet the Professors.
Yeah.
We're going to do 20 this year, and we'll see how it goes. It's
Yeah.
possible that, maybe that's no longer needed.
Hmm.
Maybe with the cost of the meeting and everything else that's happening, people will go, well, maybe I don't need to go to an MTP. But we're bringing that back, and we'll see how it works.
Great. Great. I like the fact that it's sort of, you're thinking about this as a test, right? Like, let's give it a shot and see how it works. If it's very successful, we'll replicate it. If not, we'll change it somehow.
I'm very adaptable that way. We'll do what needs to be done to move the field of rheumatology forward.
Great. I also wanted to ask you, Greg, as a medical educator, there's a lot of data that shows that passively attending a lecture doesn't provide much benefit for the learner because they're not able to first learn and retain that material and then transfer those ideas when, they're out seeing patients in the real world. How are you thinking about increasing the education that happens at Convergence this year?
Yeah, that's a great question, John, and you're exactly right. The more recent literature on CME suggests that if you can get the attendees to reflect on what they do and have a commitment to change, they can incorporate that new information into their practice. So what we're trying to do at Convergence is take principles of education and apply it to the meeting. We've actually initiated a group they've named themselves the Quilt Group, Quality Improvements in Learning and Teaching. There's a group of 3 outstanding educators who have taken on the task of looking at the meeting from an educator's eye. And so what we've done is first, you'll notice the assessment questions after each session are much different. They are no longer, how did you like this session and would you recommend it to a friend? Now it's, did this session cause you to reflect on how you currently approach this problem? And what are 2 or 3 things you took away from this session?
Oh, I love it.
The other thing that this group has done is I'm really impressed with them and grateful for their work with Convergence, is they went to the Educators Forum and they recruited a bunch of their colleagues to be mentors for speakers. And they sent out information to the speakers, and they've had quite a few people sign up. And the purpose is to help the speakers learn principles of active learning. How to incorporate that into your session. The other thing we've done is I've noticed that what I call irreverently speaker bloat. I mean, the sessions have gotten shorter with more speakers put in there. And it's hard, as you know, as a speaker, you've given, I'm sure, plenty of formal sessions. You only get 15, 20 minutes. It's hard to really develop your topic without just being focused on your data. So we're trying to make sure that each speaker has at least 30 minutes, hopefully a little bit longer in some cases, so that they have a chance to develop their topic and engage the audience in ways that help that active learning process go forward.
I love those ideas. Those are things that I tell my trainees all the time about reflecting on the lectures, trying to write down the things that they learned. Studies have shown that sort of reflection really helps people learn the material much better and be able to apply it to other settings. We're going to talk about the meeting, but there's a lot of stuff that happens before the meeting actually officially starts. I think it's called the advanced programming. Can you tell me a little bit about sort of what happens in the couple days before the opening session?
It's busy. I mean, we think about the meeting being 3 or 4 days, but actually it's like 5 days. It begins with the FIT program, Fellows in Training program, which began probably about 15 years ago and has been a really wonderful activity for fellows. When I was program director many years ago, we required our fellows to go to the meeting, and the attending stayed home and covered the service because we thought it was such an important activity for the fellows both in terms of education, but also identity. I mean, you go there and you see thousands of people from all over the world, and you identify with this group. I'm a rheumatologist, part of a worldwide community. It's pretty cool. The other things that happen before the course include the ultrasound. We have beginning, intermediate, and advanced ultrasound courses. That's run by another committee, and that runs actually Thursday and Friday.
Mm-hmm.
We also have the Global Summit, which is run by the Global Engagement Committee. It's a day-long virtual activity that includes people from all over the world, topics that are really important to people throughout the world. And some of the sessions for this activity are about gout, hyperuricemia, which is not just United States problem. It's a problem around the world. And I spent some time in the Pacific Islands, and it's even a bigger problem there.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to talk about infections and rheumatic diseases, talk about workforce issues around the world. Things like that I think are very important to people. And it's in itself is almost like a CME activity. And there is CME credit given for
Wow.
those sessions as well. And there's also the Clinical and Basic Research Conference.
Yep.
This year is going to focus on cardiometabolic issues and rheumatic diseases.
Ooh, super important.
Topics. What's amazing, I've been in this field for so long. I'm almost 35 years as a rheumatologist. And before we were worried about how to control people's joints. Now we're worried about sort of secondary issues, which is great. How do we help them live longer and prevent the cardiovascular disease that used to devastate our patients?
Yeah, and I think the world famous review course, right?
Yes, the review course. Thank you. So the review course is also, it's going to be about a half-day course this year. It'll go until, I think, 8 until 1. And they provide lunch too. So they want to know if you're going to go so they can make sure they have enough lunches for everybody. But it's always great. I was on one of my stints on the AMPC, I was in charge of the review course. That's a blast. It's really a lot of fun. So the other thing that's important to know, so years ago, I didn't realize this until 2 years ago, that it's no longer a separate charge. So I don't think a lot of people know that. So you pay your all-access fee. You get to come to the review course or the Clinical and Basic Research Conference. That's all included in the fee, where before it was a separate charge. Like $300, I think, to attend before, but that is now free. The ultrasound course is a separate charge. The other activities, the pre-courses are free. There's also the ARP-sponsored radiology boot camp, and that's going to be on Friday as well. And then, of course, the opening session, you got to come to that, right?
Who's the keynote speaker?
So I'm not actually in charge of that. That actually is the ACR board and the ACR president, Deborah Desir, who get that person, the keynote speaker. But I do know the topic is going to be on disparities in medicine.
Very important.
Yeah. And I wish I could tell you the speaker. I'm sorry I can't.
Okay. No worries. I mean, last year it was awesome on artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
It's coming it's here already for a lot of what we do. All those sessions are always like really up to date, and you guys always manage to bring really fantastic speakers. Looking at sort of the sessions, the official sessions, are there any particular sessions you're really excited about?
My career focuses on ILD currently. All those ILD sessions, of course, they're critical. They're very important. So I do have some good ILD sessions. And ILD has been sort of a hot topic in general recently as rheumatologists become more involved in combined clinics and those sorts of things. In fact, I think there actually is a network group on combined clinics. The Committee on Quality has come up with a bunch of really interesting sessions, and there's going to be some sessions on trial outcomes for GCA, what you'll be looking for. There's also going to be a very important session on an update in the diagnosis and treatment of lupus nephritis. That'll be a key session. So those are going to be great. And I think all the sessions are going to be good, but those sort of stand out.
I'm always looking forward to the Knowledge Bowl. I have to say I've been the host of the Knowledge Bowl and helped to prepare the questions back in the day. I've been training our fellows to be prepared for the Knowledge Bowl, and our team actually won last year. We're hoping to repeat again this year. Any other fellows out there, you better be studying already.
So let me tell you, the Knowledge Bowl is sort of interesting. I mean, it's become so popular. When it was one of the most well-attended sessions, the finals for the Knowledge Bowl.
That's awesome.
So I encourage people to come to the Knowledge Bowl because see if you can answer those questions, number one, right? And also come cheer for your favorite team.
Yeah.
But we had so many so many programs want to participate. We actually had to do a lottery. So that unfortunately can't incorporate every single team that wants to participate. And under the current way we do things, maybe we'll have to change that. But there was a lottery for participation. But your team got in because you're the champs.
Yeah, maybe in the future, thinking about maybe some preliminary rounds that could be held before Convergence online. And then the winners of that maybe go on to Convergence to at least allow everybody to participate at some point.
So I need to bring you back and put you in charge.
It was a lot of work. Yeah, I always also, like the year in the review, especially, for me, like the clinical aspect of it, just seeing what my colleagues have published and getting refreshed on things that are changing. I find those very useful.
Well, the one of the things, some of the, the best sessions are really the ones that focus on the science.
Mm-hmm.
So, when people ask, what should I attend? It's like, you got to go to the plenaries. You got to see what is the cutting edge science that's going to impact your practice over the next few years. Go to the oral sessions as well that interest you, because then you'll see some really high quality science that will, again, impact what we do in the future. So again, that's one of the main purposes of Convergence, is to share that science, get people excited about what's happening, and maybe get them involved. Have them come up with some good ideas to move the field of rheumatology forward. So those are critical sessions as well. The other sessions I really like are the memorial lectures. Those always have some really great speakers on important topics. This year, actually, you probably know Marcy Bolster, right?
I've heard of her.
So Marcy's giving the Rheumatology Research Foundation a memorial lecture to memorialize Dr. Joseph Flood, who was the ACR president back around 2015. Dr. Flood was very interested in not only incorporating PAs and nurse practitioners into rheumatology practice to extend us, but also was a global rheumatology outreach person. So Marcy's going to give that lecture, and anything Marcy does is great. And so I'm looking forward to.
I can certainly vouch for that. And for first-time attendees, any other recommendations that you can provide them so that they can make the most out of the meeting? Not just about, as you mentioned, the science, but also sort of the networking and the belonging that happens at Convergence.
I still, even though I'm getting to be an old guy, I still remember what it was like to attend my first, used to be called ACR annual meeting. Now we call it Convergence. I tried to do way too much. I was exhausting myself going from place to place and trying to see everything I could. My advice to somebody who's a first-time attendee is don't try to do too much. Mm-hmm. You also have access to on-demands, and you can look at sessions that you may miss weeks and months later.
Yeah.
Do come to the plenaries. The hot topics are in science. I would suggest going to the poster sessions as well.
Yeah.
Attend a networking session that is of interest to you and will help promote your career. And then attend the sessions that fill in a hole in your education. And also attend the sessions that really extend what you're interested in. So you get to know who is involved in that field. Maybe go up after the session and ask them a question and introduce yourself. So that's what I would recommend. Plus, first-time attendees, you got to enjoy where you are, right? Go to the Smithsonian. Maybe take a few hours. Don't attend any sessions. I know I shouldn't say that as AMPC, right? Go out to dinner with friends. Make it fun, but also make it so that, again, it moves your field forward in some way, that you'll come and enjoy it again.
Awesome. You mentioned that at the beginning of our discussions that you want ACR to be sort of the premier international rheumatology meeting. How are you thinking about making this more accessible and inclusive for the international rheumatology community?
Yeah, so the Global Engagement Committee has done a great job of putting together a global summit as one way of doing that. There also are some networking groups and some regular activities promoted mostly by the Global Engagement Committee. In the best of all possible worlds, we would live stream this and make it available to people. The Global Engagement Committee also has a fund that allows assistance to people from other parts of the world to come to Convergence and just gather with us. As much as I value virtual activities, especially in the pre-planning process for Convergence, there's really a power in gathering. I don't know if you've noticed that. And the virtual program we had, they were great and they were necessary and we had to do it. And Sharon and her group did a great job of sort of quickly converting from a live meeting to a virtual meeting, and it really made it useful to us. now that we're back gathering together, you just sense that there's a certain power in being in the same place at the same time. You make those connections more easily than you can virtually. You can talk about the grandkids,
Absolutely.
your dog, all kinds of things. You make those really close connections with people that go beyond just talking about the science. But you also get a chance to sit down with people and talk about the science much more easily than you can virtually as well. So I'm grateful for the opportunity we have to gather together again to do all this stuff.
So even though the sessions won't be live streamed, will they all still be recorded and available for people on demand? So people that are unable to attend the meeting, they can still purchase to access the meeting virtually?
Absolutely. So I guess people in the past would take some time off work and watch the live streaming, but now you can do this on the weekend. You don't have to take time off work necessarily. You can purchase a package and you can spend a Saturday going through the sessions that you think are most important. I don't know exactly which ones won't be, probably some of the smaller sessions, but the major sessions will indeed be recorded and be available on a platform post-meeting. I wish I could tell you exactly how long it would take between the session and when it would show up on the platform, but we're planning to do that. But also, the Committee on Education has discussed actually packaging information either as a whole meeting or in segments as rheumatoid arthritis or lupus. People can purchase packages they feel are most important to them and most useful for their practice, or they can purchase the whole thing.
Super cool. Now we got to talk about the hard stuff. I've noticed attending the meeting has just becoming more expensive every year. Can you explain to people a little bit about sort of the costs of the meeting and why it's so expensive and why it's still worth coming?
I understand. I mean, it's not cheap to come to a major medical meeting anymore. I mean, it's about $1,000, I think, this year for all access. You got to pay for a hotel. You got to pay for foods, although I always choose a hotel that has that free breakfast.
I noticed that too. Yep.
Then you get the travel cost. I mean, it's not cheap, and we understand that. So, one of the things we've done is made the pre-courses, for the most part, available to everybody who wants to come. That is an added benefit. You get on demand. So if you didn't get a chance to see some sessions and you need CME or MOC points, you get a chance to do some of those things after the meeting. So we hope that's added value. We're about in line with other major medical meetings. In fact, I should mention I went to ULARD. It's about the same price as Convergence. So all medical meetings have become more expensive. And I think the reason for that, John, is number one, the support from industry has declined.
Yeah.
And like everything everywhere, costs have gone up. I mean, it's more expensive to rent the space that we use. More expensive for all the labor that it costs to set up those chairs, those 10,000 chairs in the main hall. Somebody's got to set those up, right? And so that labor cost has become more expensive as well. So everything about doing the meeting has become more expensive in addition to the decline in industry support. In fact, I remember when a lot of the biologics first came out, there was just a flood of support because they wanted to get that information out there. Now, the only way you know that there's a new biologic out is you see a commercial on TV, right?
Yeah.
Advertising the latest, greatest medication for psoriatic arthritis. I think those are the two main reasons, is the costs have gone up everywhere and the support that we used to have has gone down. Plus, we do support the FIT program, which is pretty expensive to do, but we think it's still an important program for our fellows. So there are a lot of costs associated with doing Convergence that we may not think about either.
Yeah.
We did save some money again by not doing live streaming. That was a huge cost. So we decided to put that money, as I mentioned, into a hopefully more robust platform for on demand.
And one thing we haven't talked about, we're going to be in Washington, D.C. in November of 2024, which is right after elections. How do you think that's going to be?
The ACR board is thinking about that stuff. That's a great point. We've actually had discussions about stuff.
Yeah.
And we don't think there'll be any major issues right at that time. It's something that we have thought about. They've actually discussed more about security at the meeting. It is an issue. I don't think it'll dissuade people from coming.
And as you mentioned, just the opportunity to be in Washington, D.C. is just incredible.
There's a certain energy there. Hopefully the weather will be good for us. And again, I hope people will take advantage of all the things you can see in Washington, D.C. and go do some fun stuff.
Greg, any last tips for people that are still on the fence about whether they want to come to the meeting or not? Any other words of advice that you can provide so that they can make their decision easier?
This year, as I reviewed the science for the plenaries, it was just incredible, some of the stuff. A lot of things that I've incorporated into my practice, I often first heard at Convergence during my career. And so come to the meeting, see what's going on, spend a lot of time in the poster halls and listening to some of the oral presentations. And after you're done, I would recommend, after a session, I recommend people write down a couple of things they felt really that were critical points from that session. And then utilize that, if you can, in your practice or in the laboratory, because we have a very robust basic science program as well. And you notice the basic science group comes up with the coolest names for their sessions. You'll see that. Somebody's really clever in that basic science group, and they come up with some really great sessions.
I love it.
Convergence is going to move the field of rheumatology forward. Come be part of that and come help move the field forward by just being present at the meeting.
Awesome. Just to putting some dates out there. So this is going to be Convergence 2024 starting November 14th. That's a Thursday. That's when the advanced programming will start. That includes the Global Rheumatology Summit, the FIT program, and the ultrasound course. On the 15th, which is the Friday, the review course in the morning, and in the afternoon is when the opening session starts. And then it'll go from Friday, November 15th until Tuesday, November 19th until 12:30. So for anybody interested, I'll certainly be around and hope to see all of our listeners there.
So it started a day earlier than usual just because of the space availability. And also that meeting started a little bit later in the day. You don't see too many 7:30 sessions. So you get to sleep in a little bit so you can enjoy a long dinner, with friends and colleagues and former fellows. Come a little bit later to the meeting and be there with us.
I love it, Greg. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to what Convergence 2024 has to offer, and hopefully to say hello and thank you in person for organizing what seems to be an awesome meeting.
Thanks, John, for having me on, and thanks for the chance to talk about one of my favorite topics, convergence.
Love it. My favorite time of year. As we've just heard, ACR Convergence 2024 promises to be a dynamic and enriching meeting for anyone passionate about advancing the field of rheumatology. There's a revamped poster hall, Meet the Professor sessions are back, and a big emphasis on creating more interactive educational opportunities. I really think that this year's Convergence will truly be a space where the global rheumatology community comes together to share, to learn, and to innovate. Thank you all for listening, downloading, subscribing to our show, and for rating us with 5 stars, or however many stars you think we deserve. You can find all of our previous episodes and show notes for this episode at acronair.org, as well as on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, go get your tickets to Convergence. And of course, stay healthy.